Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are here with Responding to a Disclosure Lunch and Learn series. Today, we are going to be talking about parents, caregivers, and grandparents and how they can be responding to disclosures when they're hearing it from the young people that they are caring for. So we have a variety of sexual assault centers that have collaborated on this on these series, but we have some really awesome specific ones that are here today.
Hello. My name is Maddie, and my pronouns are she, they. I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator for the Sexual Assault Center, Kingston.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alicia Fisher. Pronouns are fluid, whatever you feel like, I'm down for. I am here with the Kawartha Sexual Assault Center.
Hi, folks. My name is Claire. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the public educator at Savvis of Halton.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for sharing space and time today. My name is Daisy. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the youth counselor and case manager for the Women's Support Network of York Region. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jensen. I use she and they pronouns, and I'm the public educator for Guelph-Wellington Women in Crisis.
Fabulous. So let's get into what we're going to be talking about today. Again, this is a very introductory topic. So if you're wanting to learn more, please connect with one of our centers and we can dive very much a lot more deeper into these topics. But we're going to be what we just did, some introductions. We're going to briefly discuss trauma and sexual harm. We're going to be talking about what even is a disclosure and how does that differ between a realization. And then we're going to be discussing some affirmations, letting you know that you're not alone, and some preventative measures that you can put in place, how to respond, and then looking at some resources for parents, caregivers, and grandparents as we have shifted into a time where a lot of people are caring for children. So let's get into discussing what is trauma, what is sexual harm, and then moving into disclosures.
So sexual violence is a broad umbrella term to describe any violence, either physical, psychological, that's carried out through sexual means or by targeting sexuality. But let's unpack that a little bit more. It involves the use of violence as a means to gain power and control over others. And that desire for that power and control we know is rooted in gender and social inequality, as we know that those who identify as women, transgender, gender diverse, members of the 2S LGBTQ+ community experience the highest rates of sexual violence, particularly when they have intersecting identities and experiences. So, for example, we know that Indigenous women face higher rates of sexual violence than non-Indigenous women. But you can see here some different acts that fall under the umbrella of sexual violence, but it's acts that can be categorized as objectifying and hypersexualizing and violating someone by subjecting them to unwanted sexual acts. And that term unwanted is really key in there. So whether that violation comes from people's bodies, their comfort, their consent, these can be, sexual assault, sexual harassment, flashing, sharing images without consent, and stalking. It can also be incidences that take advantage of someone sexually. So that could be voyeurism or sexual exploitation and trafficking. And it's important to note that sexual violence can also intersect with other forms of violence, such as emotional, financial, physical, and online violence as well.
And unfortunately, what we see in Canada is that sexual violence is quite prevalent. So in Canada, 1 in 3 women, 1 in 6 men, and 1 in 2 trans and non-binary individuals will experience some form of sexual violence in their lifetime. And unfortunately, this form of sexual violence and harm does happen to young people. 1 in 10 Canadians reported being sexually victimized before they turned 18. The numbers that we currently have for the age group and gender identity that experience sexual violence at the highest rate are girls and women between the ages of 15 to 25. In the majority of sexual assault cases, the offender was known to the child. So this makes supporting a young person very difficult, especially if you know this individual. And there is a really strong connection between child sexual abuse and mental health conditions. So child sexual abuse is not simply that an event that happens and it's one and done. This can have really profound and long-term effects. But what you can do as a caregiver, a parent, or even a grandparent, or someone that's simply there with the young person, is that when children feel supported, nurtured, and safe when disclosing abuse, they have a much more higher chance of a successful recovery and future adjustment. And of course, that success can look very different from one individual to the next.
And on that note of fostering a space that is safe, that is nurturing, that fosters trust and comfort with your children, here are a few affirmations. It is okay not to have all of the answers. It is so okay. And some other things to keep into consideration is to not take it personally, and to know that you're not responsible for what happened to your child. You love your child, you care for them, and the world is sometimes unkind, and that you're not responsible for what happened, but you are responsible for the kind of home environment that you create for your children, where they feel safe and comfortable to bring any and all kind of conversations and questions to you. And some affirmations you can share with your children include, "It's not your fault. Thank you so much for trusting me with this and for sharing. You're so strong. Let me know how I can be there for you. Let me know what you want to do with me. Would you like me to listen? Do you want to plan something or check out some resources together? Do you have any questions?"
And in keeping with the idea that it's okay not to have all the answers, the thing we want to really attend to first and foremost is just creating and cultivating that safe space for trust. So in doing so, there's some key components that we should look to in cultivating this trust, and that's knowing about our sexual violence and local resources. So in not having all the answers, it's okay to know when to consult others. It's important that when we are handling disclosures, we're listening first, we're not reacting, and we're making space for that individual, removing the judgment and saving our thoughts until later. We also want to be role models in our behavior. So we want to ensure that the individual feels safe, that we aren't reacting, and that we're not taking it personally. We want to check in with our child's network of support. So that looks like checking in to see if they have the appropriate pieces of care in place to help them outside of us, because we recognize that they will be needing support that can't totally be provided by just us. So do they have one? Do they have friends or teachers that they trust? So we want to foster a safe space, a family space without judgment, and we really want to focus on our children feeling safe to bring any and all conversations and questions to the table. Transparency is really important.
And along those lines, we want to make sure that we understand, as parents, caregivers, grandparents, etc., the difference between disclosures and realizations. So disclosures are typically experiences where folks understand that what happened to them, they're sharing an experience that could be harmful or traumatic. There's that understanding piece, whereas realizations are sort of the conversations where folks are disclosing something, they're speaking to you about something that's traumatic, but they're not quite there yet. They haven't quite come to terms with that just yet. And they're not maybe realizing that they're speaking to you about something that's a little bit bigger, sort of like the tip of the iceberg type of analogy. And in the context of parents, caregivers, and grandparents, it's also incredibly important to realize that reactions and sort of understandings of trauma can be different. And so in this case, it's incredibly important to remember that a child might be prone to sort of take back a disclosure or have the understanding that maybe there's some uncertainty and that type of thing. And it's really important to know that all different types of trauma present differently, especially in children. And it's completely normal for a child to want to take back a disclosure or to sort of waver in their commitment or their language to what happened to them, and to sort of support that process throughout your caregiving.
All right, so now we're getting to our favorite part of the presentation, which are what are the strategies to how we can respond to a child's disclosure of trauma and sexual harm. So within this, there are various aspects that you can use to respond to a disclosure, but really it just comes down to one very important word, and this is valor. So Valor was created by Sasha to provide space, to provide understanding, and taking courage to understanding how we can support someone in the different components within that. Each letter has a very important meaning, which is validate, applause, listen, options, utilize, and reframe. And we're going to be going through that. And sometimes when it comes down to supporting a survivor, supporting a disclosure, it can feel like a lot. But this one word can give you some understanding, can provide you some direction to be able to provide that support. It can be overwhelming to think about, how can I effectively do this? But I think we all need to start with acknowledging that you already have some amazing tools in your toolbox. And one of the most amazing tools that you have in your toolbox right now is this willingness to learn. And by being here today. So this is really important for all of us. So let's get into Valor.
All right, so V in Valor is validate. So validation lets a survivor know that it's okay to feel how they're feeling, that their emotions are right, and that they're never too much or too little. And it helps a survivor know that they're not alone or they're not abnormal. And when using this validation, it's really important that you use your tone, your facial expressions, body language to match what you're saying. Otherwise, your attempt to validate can actually seem insincere maybe, or intimidating. And we really want to work on fostering that nurturing and safe space where your children feel comfortable to come and disclose and to share. So this is why it's also really, really important to use your own words and maybe even do a little bit of storytelling. And so some examples of validating phrases include, it's understandable that, instead of I understand, or it's okay that you did X, Y, Z. It makes sense that this is how you reacted. This is very common. Of course you would feel that way. You have every right to feel. And just sort of meeting them where they're at and mirroring maybe some of the language that they're bringing to you as well, and trying to foster and create that comfortable space.
So next we have the A in Valor, which stands for applaud. And so this really means recognizing the things that the survivor is doing well. So essentially you're applauding them for reaching out for support, for thinking about their situation, for reflecting and working through it, or attempting to work through it, and even the way that the survivor is surviving their trauma. So examples of applause could look like saying things like, this took a lot of courage, or you've taken the first step by recognizing that this is wrong and not your fault, and you've taken the first step by reaching out to me. So yes, applause is incredibly important because you're taking the time to acknowledge that this is difficult and that it took a lot for the survivor to reach out.
All right, the next is to listen. So the first step is always to listen, and to listen with the goal of providing support. It's important not to only be giving the person you're supporting your full attention, but to also show them that they are being heard. Body language can be a great indicator that you're listening. Angling or looking towards the person speaking is a great start. Affirmatives like yeah, okay, used when appropriate, are very helpful and may be seen as encouragement. When someone is talking about their experiences, you don't always have to say a lot to show that you're truly listening. Parroting, saying what they say back with the same language. I feel angry, so you feel angry. You can use that sparingly so as to not sound as though your responses are automatic. There's also paraphrasing, which is rewording what they said to show that you're learning and listening, and using different language to show more comprehension. Mirroring is also very helpful. It's paraphrasing with additional content, especially naming your feelings. Good mirroring phrases would be like, it seems as if, I hear you saying, I think I hear you saying, I'm wondering if, things like that. As a supporter, we may want to ask some questions, and that's okay, but it's important to remember to ask questions for the survivor's benefit, not for our curiosity. We also need to be careful to stay where the person is at, not moving them towards where you think they should be. And it's important to accept that you don't need to know the whole story.
And the O in Valor stands for options. And as empathetic and caring individuals, it's a really natural human response to when we hear a disclosure to want to respond with giving advice and wanting to solve problems when individuals come to us with them. But it's important in the context of a disclosure and talking about sexual violence and trauma that we want to ensure that we're centering the thoughts, the feelings, and the needs of the individual who's coming to us for support. So rather than looking at it as how can we fix this situation, framing it and seeing it as how can we act as a supportive resource for someone and to be that person that they trust and to provide information and options with their interests in mind. And so you're really tying in with this skill as well, that validating and listening. So as parents and caregivers and family members, there will likely be some decisions that you might have to make, particularly if an individual who's disclosing is underage and there's a duty to report, say if you're a teacher or a caregiver in certain circumstances. But what you're wanting to look at is looking at options and making decisions about next steps in a way that's collaborative with the person that's disclosing and keeping their interests in mind. And really tying in that listening piece, following their lead. So picking up on cues and phrases such as someone saying, I don't know what to do next, or I'm really struggling with the emotions that I'm feeling right now, or I'm really anxious about having to tell this person about this. So looking at those cues of what they're saying and figuring out how you can suggest options that meet that individual's needs. And in providing those options, it's important to do it slowly and one at a time to be able to have them digest and actually process the options. But also as individuals are assessing options, to be able to support and validate whatever decisions they make, even if they don't want to go with the options that we might suggest. So some of the phrasing and options that folks might provide would be, if someone has said, like, I'm really struggling with my emotions right now, suggesting, would talking to a counselor help to unpack some of those feelings? Would that be an option for you? If talking to someone and disclosing to someone else is making them really anxious and nervous, providing options of, would you like me to be with you when you tell that person? Or would you like me to tell them for you? And even asking, is now a good time to talk about some possible options that might work for you of what to do next? So just to recap on that, it's important to take their lead, to listen attentively, to determine the areas of support where that might be requested or feelings being shared, and provide options slowly based on what you're hearing and their needs.
All right, the U in Valor. And so this ties in and connects really well with it's okay not to have all the answers, but have some resources on hand. Utilize your resources, connect and refer for support for yourself, for support for your child, the survivor, and know what community options are available. Your local sexual assault centers, for example, or crisis lines, maybe have brochures available. Or if you found some educational like TikTok accounts, maybe share that with your children as well. Utilize social media, everything at your disposal. Just keep it like a Rolodex, ready to roll.
Awesome. And the last word in Valor here is reframe. And so this is all about understanding the survivor's struggle within this, right? A lot of youth especially blame themselves for what has happened to them. They feel bad for telling on the person who's perpetrated this harm in fear of getting in trouble or facing retaliation, maybe getting detention at school if they told people. And so it's really important to reframe this and let the child know that they are not in the wrong for this and that this is certainly not their fault, and that using some of the other options here in Valor, that takes a lot of courage to come forward and talking about something like this. And that, while you're starting off with the validating, it's always important to let the survivor know that their emotions are valid, that that the emotions to this trauma is understandable, and that it's okay to feel uncomfortable. It's okay to not want to go to school. It's okay to want to sleep all day, because this trauma really impacts your entire sense of self. So reframe this to let them know that this is not their fault, and that what happened to you is sexual assault, and that they did not consent in any way. So as we just went through all the aspects of Valor, which is validate, applaud, listen, options, utilize, and reframe, we just want to throw out a couple more resources here. The first two here are Amaze and Scarlet Teen. So these are resources for both youth and children, youth, and parents to learn about sexuality, comprehensive information about relationships, about consent. Amaze also has a really awesome video about childhood sexual assault I implore you to check out.
Another one we wanted to highlight is MedTrack Action on Violence. They have a great deal of amazing online resources, particularly if you go to their tools and resources section of their website. They have a section there specifically for parents and guardians who are wanting to learn more, and some other great resources and lots of different types of gender-based violence that can help youth understand their rights, resources, and can help adults and caregivers be able to provide supports as well.
Kids Help Phone is a wonderful resource for individuals who might be, devoid of a support system or in need of extra support, or if there's accessibility pieces that are kind of precluding them from seeking out appropriate care. So Kids Help Phone can be really helpful in having a kind, non-judgmental, trained facilitator to try to walk your child or children or youth through some tricky situations and in a helpful and safe and confidential manner. So the phone number is listed there, as well as the text, and they also have specific resources for newcomers.
All right, and if you want to connect your child to their local sexual assault center, please implore them to check out the OCRCC, so Ontario Coalition of Rape Crisis Centers. And if you want to check that out as well, that's at sexualassaultsupport.ca.
And finally, we have the Ontario Association of Children Aid Societies, and they have a fantastic resource list and list of support services available to parents across Ontario on their website.
Amazing. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today. We will be back on the last Tuesday of every month. Next month is October, believe it or not, and we're going to be talking about if you're a friend of someone who is responding to a disclosure. November 30th, we'll be navigating even our own triggers, hearing a disclosure, and then we will shift over to January and then talk about intimate partners. So we want to thank everyone so much for joining us today, and do enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks so much, everyone. Take care.